It is 7:30 p.m. Pam, could you take attendance, please?
Sure. Robert Romer,
Here.
Michael Gore,
Here.
Austin Groner,
Here.
James Barr,
Here.
and Michael Lau, associate member, is present, and it looks like Eric Nyland is absent.
Okay. Well, let's get started. Going over the planning board task that came out of the 2035 master plan. Pam, can you put that up and we can walk through it?
Yep. I just highlighted at the bottom of it, and this wasn't in your email, but some things that we've discussed from the implementation table to work on in 2026. And we have the housing production plan, which is kind of a must do. Possible zoning amendments to become a housing choice community by adhering to the zoning requirements to allow multifamily by right. We had on our agenda, we've discussed a few times, to evaluate the mixed use zoning district bylaw and try and find out why it hasn't been utilized in the past since its adoption. And then we had expand the zoning bylaw for allowable uses to create opportunity for additional commercial uses, establish locations for potential anchor businesses and office development. I thought that kind of fit into the focused area assessments that we discussed. And then we have to create a rules and regs for our cottage overlay.
Okay.
And those are all up for discussion. They're just things that we've kind of highlighted in the past.
Okay, now I think we can just work with those five for the time being.
Yeah, it's kind of a lot to get going.
Yeah, I mean, although I must say what has been accomplished over the last couple of years is quite a bit. Okay,
Not
go ahead.
sorry, Bob. Not to skip ahead, Pam, but with that cottage rules and regs, what does that entail? How specific do we need to get with that?
As you can get as specific as you want. It's not mandatory we have them, but we pulled a lot of the policy recommendations that Randall had from the bylaw with intention of putting them in the rules and regs. It's more specifics as to the design process and that type of thing.
I got you. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, which we felt would be a little overkill in the regulation itself and might jeopardize getting it passed at town meeting. Okay, starting at the top, you said that you were looking at putting together a grant application for the housing production plan.
Yes, I have a majority of it done. MAPC, our regional planning agency, gave us a scope of work and estimated cost to accompany the grant submission. It's due on June 4th. So right now we're just getting letters of support to accompany the application, and we plan on submitting it on time.
What order of magnitude, what is their estimated budget for that?
The budget MAPC gave us was $68,200.
Okay.
And we're requesting 100% funding, and we'd provide staff and volunteer match.
Okay. And in addition to the overall consulting assignment, I assume that we would have to put together a small committee to oversee that.
Yes, that's part of the scope of work, is to establish a committee, or because we don't really have an active affordable housing committee right now, to put together a committee to work with the consultant and go through the planning process.
And that committee need not be assigned, assembled, voted until after we receive their response to the grant application?
Yes, we have the plan doesn't expire until May of 2026. So the grant application provides for a scope of work that would be completed prior to that date, and we can put together a committee fairly quickly.
Okay. And moving down to the housing choice initiative requirement, you at this point believe that other than losing some advantage of having one, it's not a showstopper, but we need to get on with it.
Yeah, it's not, it, so if you're not a housing choice community, you lose bonus points in your grant applications. But nothing, and you may lose some funding to some eligible projects, but it's not a showstopper. But we satisfy every other criteria except for that multifamily allowed by right requirement. And EOHLC provided us with an email saying that they would consider a two-family unit as satisfying that criteria under this program.
Okay,
Can
so,
you zone for just a two-family, or does it have to be called multifamily?
If we allow, we can call it a two-family.
Okay.
Or duplex even would satisfy the criteria as well. Because they did state, they did state specifically in the email that duplexes allowed by right would satisfy the requirement. And that's recommendations that can come out of the housing production plan in the public outreach process. That's
so at this point, the housing
We'll have to do
production
that.
plan ought to be put in place, and as part of the process to issuing it and having it approved would be the duplexes.
Yes, they would evaluate the requirements that Bolton would need to become a housing choice designated community as part of that process.
Okay,
So it would probably not result in a specific zoning bylaw, but it would definitely have recommendations as to how to satisfy the requirement.
okay,
And-
so realistically, at this point, one has to come first, two is part and parcel of one's process in order to get that done. So, that's pretty clear what we have to do, and thank you for taking the initiative to go after that,
Mhm.
after the funding for that.
Yeah.
Now, evaluating changes to the mixed-use district to encourage development. Not sure how to address that at this point.
I think the question was just curiosity as to why people haven't utilized it in the past.
Think anyone has even really brought,
Yeah,
I mean, other than Bruce Wheeler, where it was purely conceptual discussions, I don't think anyone has ever brought a project to us to even be like, now someone may have talked to, it doesn't seem like you, Pam, or I mean, someone may have
No.
talked to one of your predecessors, like, and
Mhm.
asked some basic questions and immediately was like, no. But it's not like we've gone down the path and someone was like, oh, this is too onerous or the percentages aren't good or whatever. It's just like no one's ever touched it. So I don't know if that's a matter of the parcels that it covers in town. I mean, I think we know that I it was Bolton Bean, that might have been included in mixed usage, but they didn't use it because they had their own stuff. So that might be part of that zoning. And then so we lost that parcel. Not lost it. I mean, it was developed, but it didn't become mixed use. So I kind of think the big part is over, where the behind the lights at 495 there, and that we just know that's a tough parcel to develop. So I think that's why we talked about increasing it. I don't know where else we can do mixed use. We talked about Forbush Mill Road being part of it. I know Eric jumped on, but I know he was against that. I still think it's worth discussing, if it's that or if it's mixed use or nothing. I'd rather have mixed use.
well, I think that's,
But
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike.
no, I'm just like it's kind of frustrating because like we spent a lot of time on the initial plan, and it may have even failed the first time around, and then we adjusted some things. I mean, we've amended that bylaw, and I don't know that we've ever had a bite from anyone on it. So it's definitely like I don't know. I don't know if you have any insights into that, Pam, or like,
I mean, I've only read the bylaw. I haven't taken a close analysis of the properties that are available for it to be developed under the overlay, but it seems pretty lenient compared to our
yeah.
other zoning regulations, so I was kind of surprised no
And we
one's
definitely
taken a look
encouraged
at
it.
it.
I mean, Pam, I don't know, like I know the Erica used to be part of like a town planners listserv or
Hmm.
Facebook group or whatever you guys use. Like maybe people just aren't building mixed use developments right now. I don't know. Maybe they've fallen out of favor and that's not what we're seeing. So that could be part of it too. And if that's the case, there's just not a lot we can do about it.
Well, getting on to, jumping ahead for a second, looking at a really detailed evaluation of the area around Forbush and Main Street. I don't know, I don't think I was on the board, but Greg Roy came to the master planning group and presented a concept for mixed use behind the DPW as
Hmm.
part of that operation, and it was actually all drawn out. Um, and basically, we never heard from him again. We said, well, it looks very interesting. We're not the regulatory authority responsible for that. But the conversation went on to, well, wouldn't it make sense if that were expanded in a different way into the DPW land? And with that land was traded for somewhere else or what have you. And that's certainly within the master plan discussions, that's where it stopped. Greg said, thank you very much. I realized it would take a zoning change and off he went.
Yeah, the plan's actually on our website under current projects. There's a conceptual design there. It's just really boxes with notations. It's not very
Right.
definitive, but it was a smaller commercial building fronting 117 with apartments located off of Forbush.
Yeah. And to me, it makes sense rather than developing a little tiny parcel like that, is if we could have a bigger picture development of that whole area, and take what's across the street into consideration, across Forbush Mill into consideration, and the DPW land, and start thinking about, gee, where, DPW's got to move. I don't think there's any question. When, how, to where, I have no idea, but there are a number of opportunities. But I think that may well could become a topic for discussion of that general area and maybe much more appealing to development if it were done in a bigger area. It would give you better access, egress. It would avoid having to bring stuff out right up against the roundabout on 117, a whole bunch of things. But I think it's worth, first of all, if you can provide any insight into why, as Mike said, it really has been ignored. Um, and whether we're, at this point barking up the wrong tree and we ought to just forget it and leave it on the books, but get on with looking at further, commercial development down in that area using a straight commercial rezoning. Part of it's already that way.
Could
I
be
don't know.
part of housing production plan also, right? That
Right.
we talked about market conditions for mixed use developments. 'Cause I mean that falls under the purview of housing production, right? Because we get housing out of
Yes.
mixed use.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it could be
Um,
pretty nice housing if we knew what we'd, if we designed it properly and worked with the developer to make it happen.
yeah, definitely. Pam, you said that there was a proposal for the mixed use
Yeah, we looked
on
at it at
site?
the last meeting. Hold on, I can bring it up if you just give me 1 second.
This
Back
is
in
the one, is
2021.
concept plans?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were
No, so
concept.
yeah, so that was Habitat. That was Bruce Wheeler's one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And Greg Roy
Yeah,
was the
yeah.
engineer.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so we know where I mean, we can certainly ask him what. I'm sure he has a million reasons interest rates, you know, material costs, all sorts of stuff right now.
Plans look really nice.
Yeah, no, we looked at when he brought him in.
Yeah,
There's a village green and a common area. Looks like there's a nice mix of a lot of things that would be really nice to have there.
Yeah.
but it didn't take into consideration the roundabout and egress and entrance. And that's
Right.
something that we're gonna have to be very serious about.
Well, he was aware of, I mean, because the roundabout project was talked about then, so he was even willing to either do work or move things in order to accommodate that, because it would
Yeah.
only benefit him. I mean, the intersection as it is was just not great.
No.
Um,
But
Ye-
it did not take into, well, obviously it couldn't take into consideration the DPW land, right?
Correct, yeah.
And
So
I
and
don't know,
that's the big thing, like who wants the DPW in their backyard?
Right. So that's, that's a win-win. If we have to find a different home for the DPW, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I like, who is the right, I mean, is it right to start with, town administrator Marie to like,
Mhm.
just kind of like just to sort of, not do anything, just sort of talk things through, what would be possible, identify. I mean, like I think of that, where the lacrosse field is on 117. I mean, I still think that's a perfect spot for the DPW. I think that's town land.
Yeah,
The
Michael, is
lacrosse
that ne-
kid,
is that next to Clinton Savings?
that one, yep,
Yeah,
that field
okay.
right there. I mean, like that's the central part of town. It's,
Yeah.
convenient for them to get everywhere.
Right.
And then it's just say like, you know, if we even wanted to think about trying to form a committee to like figure out how we move that and then apply for grants and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I think it would just be like a gigantic fight for sure. I mean, I'm willing to do it because I think that's a bad spot for the DPW right there. And it
here,
is,
oh, it's terrible.
yeah, right. And it is good business location,
It's
where
a
it
terrific
is.
business location.
Yeah.
And
When
even,
you say it would be a fight, what do you mean by that? It would be a fight for us to advocate for moving this and
Well,
constructing
I
a new
mean,
building?
the cost would, like, if we could somehow get a new DPW built for free. I mean, I remember years ago, they were always talking about they wanted to build a new facility, right? Because they don't have enough garage space and there's all sorts of issues.
Bathrooms, yeah.
And so just if you want to talk about the money that would be required for that, I mean, that's millions of dollars to do that. Even if we got grants, I mean, I can't imagine it would offset, that much of it. So I think that will just be that would be a hard fight to say, especially after the school and the Prop 2.5, to say, okay, when now we want to add another several $1 million worth of spending just to, in the hopes of having some better business zone land over here.
Yeah, but if it's proposed with a very concrete plan, if I don't know how much you could Bruce could commit to that plan, but if he could commit to it, certainly we're not spending millions of dollars all at once, right? We would be taking out a loan and
Yep, it'd be
paying off
bonded.
that loan
Yeah.
over 20, 30 years, right?
Yeah. It's one of those things, like
So-
if we were, like if it is definitive that we were going to build a new DPW, I think that's what it comes down to, is if
Mhm.
someone has that in their 5-year budget forecast of yes, okay, we've reached the usable end of this facility, and I don't know, like this shed is sinking, we can't do this, it needs a total rebuild. If that's the case, then you could say, well, yeah, okay, it's going to cost the same to build it here or there, right? Because we're just like saying, hey, let's give the DPW a new facility.
oh no, that would never work.
Yeah.
But I think, getting back to looking at this whole area, I think in order to have a cogent argument, and look at alternative locations and what the financial deals might be, as Austin has suggested, we need to, again, get back to looking at that whole area, figuring out who owns what do we know what it's zoned like, what does the
Yeah.
topography look like, what can we do for access and egress in the big picture, and start brainstorming about how we could handle that without necessarily suggesting it's going to happen even in the next 5 years. But
Right.
inevitably, we really should have a plan for
Yeah.
relocating the DPW. And again, I wouldn't call it land banking, but in one of the suggested locations, we already have the land. So let's think about that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then,
and
go ahead. I'm sorry, Austin.
I was gonna say, I think somebody brought up last time we were talking about this, that we could also sell that land to Bruce or another developer to
Right.
offset the cost of the construction.
Yeah, and we would. I mean, that clearly, if it was going to be
Exactly.
developed, and it could be when it's connected with the land he already uses, and if it were rezoned appropriately, would become a very valuable piece of land.
Mhm.
And that would
Yep.
be part of the negotiation. But now, I think, at this point, getting on to the next topic on the agenda, we need to relatively quickly develop the necessary information to evaluate the potential opportunities in that whole general area for a nice, reasonably compact commercial area with potentially housing. So that would give us an advantage. The value of the land would go way up because it is a nice piece of commercial land if connected between the two, and that would offset to some degree the price of rebuilding the DPW on another piece of land. I'm sure there's going to be a lobby that's going to say, "Whoa, we don't want to take away another athletic field." Well, I don't think we've taken away any to date. This would be the first. And we have lots of information about that area anyway, and the town owns it. But I don't know. What do people think about moving on with, let's find out, everything we can about that general area and start thinking about alternatives to use it. But I
Yeah,
think,
no, I think that's a great idea. I mean, I think we talked about having, if we had a nice one-page map of that with the parcels, who the owners are, what they're currently zoned at, that'd be a nice way to
and then,
look at it and start.
the other stuff and the limitations. I mean, we have some certainly topography limitations to some degree. Some of those can be overcome by excavation and grading and that sort of thing. And then we have some wetlands in that general area, but that's further down Forbush Mill.
Yeah, and one of my concerns with the DPWs, that's probably all contaminated at this point too. So I don't, I mean, I'm just guessing that based
And
on
I
the fact
don't,
that.
Pam, are you aware of where the remediation and testing of those areas as a result of the DPW spill are?
I'm not, no. It's easy enough to find though.
Okay.
What would it be contaminated with, like diesel fuel or something?
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you just think about all the trucks that sit there and idle and that they're doing repairs on. I mean, for a long time, they accepted used motor oil at like a burner. Like there was a shed in there where you could just dump motor oil into it. And I'm sure that probably leaked all over the ground.
I vaguely recall Randy mentioning monitoring wells on the site, so
Okay,
I'll
that's
touch
good.
base with him, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're monitoring wells, I believe, across the street as well. For a while they were providing bottled water to those folks.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a pretty substantial spill. And if I recall correctly, it was regretfully a new tank. And the connection between the fill and the tank had failed.
Oh, I didn't realize there was a specific incident. I was just assuming that there was probably some contamination just because of it being the use of it as a DPW.
Yeah.
But not so. So I didn't realize there was an actual
Yeah,
incident.
so, we ought to go back and get the history of the investigation, remediation, and ongoing monitoring from them. But that's not it depends on where it is. I don't know, I was heavily involved in all of the investigation and remediation on the common, and to the best of my knowledge, there's still a well on the south side of Main Street, in that confluence of the contamination of the common that's still being monitored.
Hmm.
It hasn't impacted the quality of the water in the well, but you can still find it in the soil.
Yeah.
And we weren't about to dig up the south side of Main Street.
So, yeah, I mean, again, nothing to solve tonight, but something to think about if we wanted to do anything with that property, is there probably will be remediation stuff involved with it.
Okay. So how do we want, Pam, you're gonna look into, talk to Randy about what information he has. There's, I believe, quite a DEP file on this thing.
Yeah, they're
And-
online. The 21E
Yeah,
reports are all
yeah.
available online, so I
Yep.
can just look those up,
Okay, and to your
talk
point,
with Randy.
yeah, Mike, to your point, I don't believe any further, phase one investigation has been done about the deep TW land per se for any other potential contamination.
Yeah, okay.
So if we can get the topos, the ownership, wetlands limitations, the stuff that Pam sent out that we did at the intersection of 495 and 117, the same set of maps. And I think they're generally available. The question is what is the area that we want to take a look at? How far? I mean,
Mhm.
and in terms of available land, where's the Taggart land on this?
What's I'm not familiar
Oh,
with.
that's the conservation land on the east side of Forbush Mill.
What, this parcel was transferred to the Concom, and I think this is the,
And then there's further down Forbush Mill.
What about lot two? It's, starting
Big
directly
parcel.
across. Yeah. Does that have like the liquor store?
Yes,
On that? Okay. There's a lot of space there.
yeah, it
Yeah, that's
certainly
huge.
is. Yep,
Yeah.
this was all divided into parcels, and those
yeah.
4
Yeah.
lots were turned into residential, single-family house lots.
Yep.
A home situated out of the business zoning district. That's the
But there's a
Chandler
potential
property.
there to have a common access to a compact commercial area behind that.
Mhm.
Again, it may be topographically limiting. I don't know.
So this
I
is
think that's the
protected.
Taggart land, I think.
Yeah. That house is in the middle. This is, and then this open space parcel was transferred to the Concom from the Tadmore subdivision.
Okay, now one additional useful piece of information is that in the transfer and purchase of the Taggart land, there were 5 acres of that land that were designated for municipal use by the town of Bolton.
Oh,
Um,
Hmm.
and I don't believe that was defined in terms of the location of that 5 acres. Rebecca would know off the top of her head
okay. I'll check with her.
when she did that whole negotiation.
What would be a use? I mean, unfortunately, that's like the wrong area where we want municipal use.
But what, what about the area that Frank Chiodo owns? When
That's
he put in the 4 house lots or 3 house lots or whatever.
Mhm.
Now, what's behind that? Is that town owned?
that's Bolton Orchards,
Right,
and the
Well,
solar field is
Yeah, but there's
located
a
here.
big, I mean, there's like a big sand pit thing behind
Yep.
the liquor store, right? So is that all one parcel? Okay.
Yeah, the sand pit and then the solar fields are behind that. So let me see if I can get the aerial to come up. It's a little,
Bring up on
where's the
Google Maps
town land
too.
around the transfer station?
the land around the transfer station's right here.
Okay,
There is a stream through it, but I think there is extra space to locate.
Is that,
These 3 parcels are all owned by the town. Maybe even this one too. Yeah. That's the cell tower parcel.
yeah,
And then these 3 are owned by the town as well.
so, I mean, those are possibilities for consideration. I mean, we need some, topography is nasty, wetlands are nasty, but maybe there is a way around it.
And that is the transfer station, right? One of those?
Yep,
Yes. Yep. Let me bring up or
And talk about contamination. I don't, you probably wouldn't want to build too close to the transfer station.
yeah, what a great
It
place
used
for
to
the
be a
DPW.
landfill too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
Pre-contaminated.
our satellite pictures don't work well.
Well, I don't think we need to discuss it tonight, but if we can
Yeah.
agree on, if you can just go back to that, overall map that you just showed, generally agree on what the area that we want to look at and where we want, what kind of information we want for that area. And then once we have that and are able to overlay it, start talking about interesting approaches to having conversations with either the town or the individual private owners about what could possibly be done to that to start developing a small commercial center. I mean, a lot of moving parts, but we can't let that dissuade us. We don't have a lot of other opportunities.
I'd be curious to hear, is this person named Bruce Wheeler?
Yeah,
I'd be curious to hear his thoughts about, assuming the DPW land is buildable and it can be remediated without a lot of cost, how that might fit into
his picture.
what he proposed earlier. Yeah.
That's-
I recall Don Lowe mentioning that he did try and strike a deal to take ownership of that parcel, but very conceptually offering the town money to kind of aid in the costs in relocating the DPW, but certainly wouldn't cover
No, but I
a good
wouldn't
portion
expect,
of it.
but again,
Maybe.
Pam, the value of the whole is substantially greater than the parts in this case. So if that became part of his parcel and that whole corner became commercial with mixed use, wow, is that a valuable piece of land? So,
Yeah, and as far as relocating the DPW, I probably a state-of-the-art facility would be millions of dollars, but I wonder if we could propose like a phased approach where we do what we need, and then we could expand that in the future, when the money's available.
yeah, and I think Randy, given the alternatives, would be interested in listening to that conversation. His argument right now is he doesn't have enough cover to put his equipment under,
Mhm.
and he's not looking for a state-of-the-art maintenance facility. He just, he's squirreling his equipment wherever he can fit it. And that's really not good for anybody. And to your point, if we can start with something that is not necessarily modular development, but can be upgraded with time.
Mhm.
Right now, this is kind of interesting. I'm in the process, having just received a grant with the Bolton Fair for 100K of putting up a 40 by 60 barn there. And the idea is that the barn is going up, absolutely um, dead simple, but is carefully designed so that it becomes a 3 and possibly 4 season facility in the future. And I think that's the kind of thing we may want to think about.
Mhm. Is there
What is
any
that?
land? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, what is the solar farm land designated as? What is that zoned as?
That's in the residential district.
Sorry, Austin, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, by Bolton Orchards, there is some additional space along 117 on the same side of the road. Is that zoned correctly? I wonder if, yeah, and if that can be
Yeah,
used.
that's zoned residential as well.
Okay.
I can bring up the. Yeah, this is the extent of the business and limited business areas.
So we would need to extend that,
Or we may want to.
right?
And the end of that is what, the post office?
The post office is this parcel 6.
And then beyond that, it's residential with, how
I
many
think-
houses are on that? 3?
On which?
Lot 7, 8, 9.
This
Yeah.
has a commercial detached accessory type of use with it. They fix
Is that
lawnmower blades and
grandfathered?
things. I believe it's been there for quite a while, yes. They just renewed their business certificate and it dated back over 10 years.
Okay.
Um,
And Bob Davis owns 9, right?
yes.
So Bolton Orchards is in a residential, if you go.
Yes.
further.
Yeah.
Interesting. How does that work? Are they grandfathered in?
The existing non-conforming.
Yep.
Okay, got it.
And that's that's the sand pit that they dug out, sold the sand, and put in ultimately the solar field. So if we want to look at this somewhat holistically, we're looking at 110, 117 to the southeast side of Forbush Mill, right?
Yeah.
And if we can get the pertinent information on that. Oh, and I don't think we want to overlook the 5 acres in the conservation land, the Taggart property.
Okay. I'll
So
talk
if
to
you-
Rebecca about that.
Yeah. She probably doesn't want to talk about that, but I think it's part of the deal. At one point, we were talking about putting a municipal building up in there, town offices. There were a bunch of things, and one of the problems is getting access because of the wetlands.
And I assume that's fully restricted, that can't be used for, the town can't like sell that.
No, 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 no. That's,
or anything.
as a full state authorized conservation easement on it.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
so-
think that was part of the deal when the Taggarts sold it to the land for a substantially reduced price.
Yeah.
And we also got state funding to buy it for conservation. Okay. So if we can look at that and get that information, so getting the overlay maps of that area, getting a little bit more information from Randy about what happened with that contamination, the original spill, and whether any phase 1 environmental investigation has been done on his land, which I sincerely doubt. Incidentally, it may have been done on the Tadmore land. If they did any financing of that land, they would have to have done that. So they may know something about that. I'm not sure how you get it, but it would be up on the DEP website. And then at the Tadmore deal. So if, we can get that information in our next meeting, at least start putting our heads together and looking at what the potential opportunities. Oh, yeah, and the topography.
Yeah, I'll do all that.
Yeah. We have a glacial moraine there. It's great for perking, but not much else.
Mhm.
Bob, in the master plan, was there discussion about relocating the DPW with any sort of
Yeah,
specific?
I mean, I don't recall, Pam, that it got into the master plan, but yes, indeed. There was quite a bit of discussion about that.
I think it's stated more broadly, not specifically relocate
Yeah,
DPW, yeah.
like it would be nice if it's not there kind of talk. I
And there
mean,
was
again,
conversation about,
oh, sorry, go ahead, Bob.
no, and that was one of the things that was under consideration in looking more carefully at the town-owned land at the intersection of 495 and 117.
Yeah.
Tucking it back in there by the cell tower, but again, we never went any further than getting the maps to start looking at it. We never looked at it, decided we had enough to do.
And, I revisited that 117 commercial corridor analysis. That was completed in
Yeah.
2022, and there's some helpful information there. They did a lot of public outreach and surveys about areas residents would want to see additional commercial development and what they'd like to see there. And it also surveyed business owners to see what kind of impediments that they faced with business expansion in the town. And just to share, because we might want to keep this under consideration as we start analysis in the additional areas where things have been already kind of reviewed. The 495 interchange was the most popular response for additional development, and then 117 near Mechanic Street to the library to create more of a town center. And then Fort Bush Mills on there, fourth on the list, and there's just people responded they didn't want any more at all anywhere in town.
Actually
So
pretty
there's
low,
some
I'm
interesting
surprised.
things in there.
Yeah, the area that got immediate pushback though from the non-business owners was the area along 117 by Wattaquatic. It's interesting though that that's the one area that's being developed.
Yeah.
Hard to tell here. How many respondents are there? I can't tell from the percentages, but just, yeah,
It's earlier in the study. I think they had over 500.
okay, that's substantial. And
Yeah,
most of them said that 117 near
My
495
Wi-Fi is
mobile
easy
station.
up.
down to Bolton Bean. Yeah.
Okay.
And
I
then
mean,
sign regulations and our use table were cited as the two biggest obstacles outside of the lack of public water and sewer provisions. That was a big one. Kind
sign
of.
regulation?
What's that?
Did
Yeah.
you say sign regulate?
Yeah,
Really?
that's in a couple surveys that I've read, that the sign regulations have kind of been restrictive to the businesses.
Like no light up sign kind of stuff, or the process for getting signs that we've since
It might
fixed?
be both. They didn't get very specific. They just said it was an
Huh,
obstacle to advertise their businesses.
interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that.
Was this all done before the 40B, the plans for the 40B, or was this
The
done after?
the 40B was planned but not yet
No,
approved
this
because it
is
is mentioned in the study.
Okay.
They noted that
Right.
half of the 580 Main Street business building would be demolished, but they referenced the wrong specifics as part of the Alta Neshoba project. I think it was used to have townhomes in the original conceptual plans, so it's changed pretty significantly since this was done.
Anyway, it was a nice piece of work, and it really does provide a lot of information.
Mhm.
What we would gain by and lose by, and all sorts of traffic and buying decisions, out of town, in town, et cetera. Quite useful.
I mean, I know focusing a lot on, um, the Forbush Mill Road, but what about the Kane property? I mean, that is the property right behind,
Yep,
on 117, right behind the 495 interchange there. We know that there's an owner who's actively looking to do something. They brought a proposal to us beforehand, which I'm not going to say we shot down, but like,
did
again,
not encourage.
I didn't think they had done enough due diligence on it I didn't think that would be palatable to the town, whether we brought it forward or not. But I mean, it's like, we could see what is that an area we want to focus on this year, to say what could be done there that doesn't involve, nuking that entire intersection and getting some services. I mean, that is the other interesting, seeing that survey. It's like, all the new residents coming in here, there's going to be so many new people in that Alta Neshoba development, and there aren't that many services. I mean, there's obviously services we have now, but if there could be other stuff in that area for them, like that's now an even more attractive area.
Yeah, I wondered about that too. There's going to be a lot of people and not, they have to go to a different town for groceries.
Yeah.
Um, there's a property across the street with a chiropractic center. It's a big piece of property. What about developing, or encouraging development on that piece of property, assuming it's zoned correctly? Or is that existing non-conforming as well?
I'm trying to find it. I'm not sure. I know what piece you're talking about, but I'm trying to
Yeah,
find it on the map.
it's like directly across from the bank, from Clinton Savings, I think.
Yeah, that's where it used to be, actually.
Yeah, that's Dr. David's building.
Yep.
It's like quite a large field there. You could imagine having some additional businesses being built there too.
Well, it's at the yellow square.
That
Is that it?
Yeah,
Oh, yep, you're right.
35 and 39, if put together, would be quite an interesting piece.
Yeah, exactly.
And it might be worthwhile talking to them, to the owners. I don't know who owns 35 at
yeah,
the
that's
moment.
what I'm looking. They're different owners, but
Well, again, Dr. David and her husband, and I know them, are entrepreneurial and very interested in working with municipalities. And I think it would be worthwhile having that conversation as well.
Yeah, what is that zoned as, Pam? The
limited
residential?
business.
Limited
Limited
business, yeah.
business.
Sure is a lot of water.
Yeah,
So what does that mean? It's wetland? Or contains wetland?
this is the riverfront, the light blue with the stream, and then the darker blue is BVW. With the associated buffers, so.
Pam, what does BVW stand for?
Oh, I'm sorry, bordering vegetated wetlands, so it's jurisdictional under the Conservation Commission.
Gotcha.
And there's 100-foot buffer associated from the edge of the wetlands, and that's represented by this darker blue line as well.
Is the existing building far enough away?
Yeah,
I don't know that. You're allowed to construct in the buffer with approval from the Conservation Commission.
Yeah, I think the building is partially in the buffer, if I recall. But again, it would be interesting to look at that. I mean, we've looked at the southwest corner. If we look at the northwest corner and look at, Mike has suggested, in the southeast corner, the Kane land, and how that fits in. I mean, they had talked about negotiating with the Boy Scouts to buy their land, all sorts, but the Boy Scouts at the moment are pursuing a conservation restriction on their land. So, lots of things in motion, but very slow motion.
Why are they doing that? Do you know?
The Boy Scouts, the Mayflower Council would like to have that remain open space conservation land.
Even if they don't own it?
Yeah,
Okay. So what would they do? Sell it to the town or sell it cheaply or donate it, or how would that work?
no, it's at this point, we don't know.
Sure.
There's
Yeah.
been lots of discussion and,
Yeah.
and the good news, I think in some respects, is that the Mayflower Council of the Boy Scouts of America has money just slightly exceeded by God's. They're very wealthy and
Yeah.
they have,
I always heard that they were in trouble and they may need to sell that for financial.
no, they're not. No.
Okay.
Now, my understanding is that a lot of other councils had a lot of problems with the legal settlement,
Mhm.
but the Mayflower Council wrote a check.
No, okay.
And keep in mind, they're on the South Shore,
Mm.
which is strange that they own land up here.
Yeah, that is. Okay.
Anyway, I mean, it would be interesting to get the same sort of information about the Kane land and further down um, Hudson Road and think about that at the same time. But I think keeping in mind that one of the advantages at Forbush Mill would be potentially negotiating a deal to get the DPW moved somewhere else and not have to pay for the whole thing. And then, as Austin suggested, doing it in a phased approach, going from, bare bones with limited facility for maintenance, but mostly for, protection, winter protection, and then eventually building that out into a more sophisticated, potentially state-of-the-art facility. And keep in mind that, and I think it's worthy of talking to Randy as well about what has to be done to keep that thing at code. I know that there have been OSHA issues and electrical flash issues and lots of other things that may represent a potential cost for just keeping it there.
Mhm.
Well, and
So,
how do we want to start that? Do you want to, Pam, do you want to just chat with Marie about and just sort of see conceptually, like if, hey, we were kicking around the idea of trying to find a different spot for the DPW, like who would be the right people to talk to? What would the right questions to ask be? That sort of stuff.
Yeah, I definitely have to talk to Marie about it. I didn't think we specifically were looking for alternate locations for DPW. I thought we were just analyzing the intersection and
Well,
kind of leaving that up to other people to figure out.
yeah,
well, I think it'd
I
be
mean,
useful to have the conversation.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think part of our role coming out of the master plan, perhaps more so than the last master plan, is to have the planning board more of an agent for planning and working with people.
yeah,
So,
I assume if anything with DPW, there would be a whole separate committee on
Yeah,
that.
that's
yeah, absolutely. But again, it was not the place of the master plan to start those conversations.
Yeah.
We asked questions. That was it. And Randy expressed his mind when it came to the condition of the DPW facilities. Understandably. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
He's done a terrific job with what he has, but he doesn't have a whole lot. Okay. What else have we got? I don't have the,
yeah. I didn't get the minutes distributed.
okay. Um, One other thing that I wanted to briefly discuss is Kai Chong sent me an email the other day, actually he sent me a couple of emails saying he would like to get on a board meeting agenda as somebody from CME to talk about the future. And that's interesting. Then I got back to him and he said, well, he would be on, but he would be sure that he thought other people would be on as well. And I guess my perspective at this point is they really, I think, hopefully understand the limits of what the board and the town can do. And it's been exacerbated by the current financial situation, certainly in terms of completing that facility. But it's not, I don't think it's a good idea to have one person ostensibly representing the perspective of CME coming to talk to us. I think it would be far better if he got together with 2 or 3 other folks and formed a little more cohesive perspective and some proposed approaches from a homeowner association perspective, and then came to the board and talked about that. And I think that's what I will say to him when I get back to him. Has anybody else got thoughts on that?
Do you want me to, I mean, we've discussed quite a few times the 3 options that we've identified for them to move forward.
Yeah,
So we can put that in a formalized memo for discussion.
yes, I think that's a great idea.
Okay, all right.
Because, there's very little wiggle room here.
Yeah, I just feel like and I haven't been involved in too many of them, but I've watched a lot of them on recording that it's a pretty circular conversation.
Yeah, and it gets very emotional and, let's lay down what we can do legally, and the town can do legally, and what could be brought to the town. And I'm perfectly willing to express my perspective of what the reception might be, considering the current environment. And are there other creative solutions? And the solution is, and Mike, I guess you and Pam know more about it than anybody, is a deal whereby they can pay for it on a long-term basis, on an annual basis, and then take care of it. And if they want to go sue the developer, that's fine. I think it's a waste of money, but but they can go do it.
Yeah, I mean, where I left it with him at the last meeting was that what they could do is betterment. The betterment involves going to the select board. That's not us. But yeah, I agree. It's like I don't think there's a lot of value in having them come in. Like there's nothing has changed at this point. There's nothing new for the planning board to do with it. And again, it just they tend to come in here and again, like I don't could, everyone could have done things better over the last 15 years there, but the fact is that their developer walked away and there's just not a lot that we can do about it. I understand why they're upset, but I think we've provided them with, if they want to move forward to get their road accepted, what they need to do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can put them on the agenda if you want, but I don't have a lot of.
Well, let's get a memo together. And I don't know whether it should go to, I think it should go to 3 or 4 of them. It's kind of.
Why don't I address it to the board and then we can review it and see
That's
what
great.
you think of that, and if after the board has a chance to review it, then we can distribute it to neighbors as an FYI for discussion.
Yep, that's a good
Okay.
idea.
And
I'm
I
just-
do like this should be going through their homeowners association.
That's what
And
amazes me.
someone who's like, I would assume they have board members, elected representatives for their
Yeah.
HOA. Like that's who we should be dealing with, not individual residents.
Do we know who those people are? The
I can
HOA?
check to see if a certificate was recorded at the registry, but last I checked, I didn't see one.
Oh dear, I
Um,
would have thought they would have been pretty proactive about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought we met with some legal representation at some point, no? For their HOA?
No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
No. No. In any case, if you could do that, we'll discuss it at the next meeting and then get it out to whoever you can identify, Pam, who potentially could represent them. Or maybe just all of them.
Okay, yeah, I may need a little bit more time just because I want to make sure everything I say is accurate and there's some legal processes that are involved that I want to make sure I get correct in terms of the
Okay.
betterments and that type of thing.
Thank
Um,
you. I'm
and I
on
have
the
a-
law committee too,
yeah.
and I'm really interested in that.
What's that?
Said I'm on the law committee and getting everything
Yeah.
straight, I think is very important.
Well, the betterments require town meeting approval and 51% of the lot owners have to agree. So there's a few steps you have to go through. I'm not terribly familiar with, kind of vaguely. I just want to make sure I get all that information correct.
And it sounds to
Even
me
the,
like that's the best route,
Yeah.
let's get on with it.
and even with the specifics, like they, after we told them that, they really never came back and said, yes, we would like more information on that process.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's where it stands. It's not, there's nothing for us to do, but
Yeah, I think the three options we discussed were the betterment, where the town would collect funds and they'd be assessed for it over a period of years, approved by whatever is decided upon. I think you could do 10 or 20. And then they could fund the improvements and petition the town for street acceptance, or they could just keep the subdivision under private ownership and maintenance responsibilities.
Yep.
So, and then that's basically how I think we ended our last conversation, and we hadn't heard back. I think a small group of them within the subdivision had collectively hired an attorney.
But I would affect, if that had happened and they saw any future, I would have expected the town would have heard from the attorney.
they're suing the developer.
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure of that.
Well, that's good.
Um,
Well, why don't we, let's make our position clear in writing and let them go. If they want to come back and propose an approach within, that criteria, that's fine.
Okay.
No, but I think that's a good, it's a good deal, frankly, that town's acting to some degree as a banker. Okay, anything else? Well, do I? hear a
Any,
motion to
just real
adjourn?
quick on the Camp Virginia or the Essex Equine.
Essex
Is
Equine?
there, yeah, is that being sold as a whole? Can they subdivide that?
I don't know. My understanding is it's being sold as a whole.
Yeah, but
That's
they
what
own a
the
bunch,
listing represented. I don't know if they're willing to take other alternatives.
they own a bunch more land there too, right? So they could potentially, could they try to do a subdivision back there?
Well, that was one of the alternatives at one point when the town was thinking about buying it with Sudbury Valley trustees.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the subdivision never happened because they put in the equine place,
Yeah,
but now, I mean, I'm assuming they would keep that because there's a whole bunch of buildings and facilities there, but I think there's additional land there, right?
yeah, I mean, yes, there's a fair amount of additional land in the hill up and back. And then there's lakefront, pond front, and I don't know what they've done to the buildings. The last time I walked through that years ago, they were in very bad shape.
The ones that they built on the property, or were they
No,
already
no,
there?
these were the ones that the
Okay.
Girl Scouts had. The ones
Oh, I
that they
see.
built on the property are very nice.
Yeah,
Um,
they look nice in the
Yeah, my
listing.
daughter is an equine vet and
Okay.
had actually worked with Gabby and his wife, and was drooling over that facility.
Yeah, this says in the Zillow listing, the possibilities are endless. Expand the existing equine center to support an equine community with homes, create
Right.
an exciting family compound on the on the pond.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's oh, hang on, maintaining the equine facility and subdividing the remaining 40 acres has strong potential. So,
Yep.
yeah, so, okay. All right, just curious if, Pam, you haven't heard anything about that, have you?
No.
Okay.
Well, I knew it was for sale, but I haven't gotten
Yeah.
any inquiries about it.
Yep, okay.
I think
Okay.
it's
That's all I had.
3.6 million, I think was the listing
3.8
price. Is
think-
that?
something like that.
Yeah,
But my daughter's perspective is, for the right person, it's definitely worth it.
Hmm,
I mean, if you look at the photographs of the interiors, the offices,
very nice.
yeah, it's quite a facility. And it was for, I mean, Gabby is, and he had 6 partners, is an ambulatory equine vet. And they did a lot of boarding there, and a little bit of training, but it could be built out into a pretty spectacular operation easily. With another 3 million or so.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay, anything else?
Just coming up on June 25th, we're gonna have a public hearing for a special permit for a common driveway servicing 5 lots off of Wattaquatic Road.
Is that our next meeting, Pam?
No, our next meeting's June 11th.
Okay, okay. Are we doing the once per month during the summer like we usually do?
I don't know.
Chair's prerogative.
Yeah.
But yeah, July and August have typically been one meeting.
Mhm.
And we can space them depending on if there's projects or things that need to happen.
okay, so the next one would be June 11th. What are we talking about for July? I can't bring up a calendar, unfortunately. Oh, yes, I can.
Oh, are you asking what are we talking about for meeting dates in July?
June 11th, and then it would be July 2nd? Or no,
Well,
I
no,
think
so
9th.
June,
20
so Pam's talking about a hearing on June 25th, and then July, we could do the 9th and the 23rd. Or we could do just one meeting in there, just one of those. We could do the 16th and do that. I'm open to whatever.
Well, I don't know if anybody demurs from this suggestion. I'd like to do it every 2 weeks for a while. You know, there are a number of things we can do. If we got an onslaught of hearings and permits, it would slow us down from doing some of the planning stuff we're doing.
I am
Yeah,
not available July 9th. My son's having surgery that day, just
Oh,
so you know.
okay. Okay, so let me revise that.
I can do 2 meetings, I just can't do the 9th.
What else could you do?
I could do any other,
the 16th, maybe?
Okay,
Yep.
hold on.
do you want me to create a, like a Google Calendar? We can put our vacations
Yeah,
and
could you? Yeah,
availabilities
that
in
would be
there. That
very
might be,
useful.
okay, I'll do
Um,
that.
I'm teaching a couple of courses out at Eastfield Village in New York in July, and I'd have to work around those. Those are 5-day courses. Okay, if you could do that, Pam, that would be very useful.
Yeah, I'll send that around for July and August and we can book our vacations and availabilities.
Is there anything coming up at our next meeting? No hearings at our next meeting, Pam?
No,
Okay.
So if at that point we can review 2 things. One of them is information about the Forbush area. And then secondly, agree that the email that you put together, the memo on the CME stuff, is appropriate and can go out and get that locked down and look for, you know, a cohesive response if in fact there is one. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Now,
Okay.
do I have a motion for adjournment?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Okay,
Second,
all in favor?
Aye.
right?
Any opposed? Thank you, gentlemen.
Hey, everyone,
And
have a
Pam.
great night. We'll see you.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Take
Thanks.
care.
Bye.